The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a scream. It traveled faster than light, carrying with it the desperate voice of Council Leader Thys of the Kithaeron Collective. Her words were translated into every known language in the galaxy, broadcast on every frequency that civilized beings monitored. To any who hear this message, Thys began, her voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. The Kithaeron Collective faces total destruction. The Vraktar horde approaches our worlds. They have already consumed the peaceful systems of Meloria and Vextus. Billions are dead. We are next. The broadcast showed images that made peaceful beings across the galaxy look away in horror. Burning cities. Ships broken in half, floating like dead fish in space. The Vraktar were not like other species. They did not conquer to rule. They consumed everything they found. Planets were stripped bare. Populations were eaten. Nothing remained but empty worlds and silence. We offer everything we have, Thys continued. Our biohealing technology, our food synthesis matrices, our crystal energy cores. Please, someone help us, anyone. The message reached the Zephyrian Empire first. The crystal beings who lived in floating cities above gas giants were old and wise. They had solved most problems through careful thinking and peaceful negotiation. When their Council of Resonance heard the plea, they hummed in harmony for 3 days. Finally, they sent their reply. The Kithaeron situation brings us great sadness. However, the level of violence required to stop the Vraktar goes against everything we believe. We cannot soil our crystalline forms with such barbarism. We will remember your species fondly in our memory cores. Next, the message reached the Luminary Collective. These beings of pure energy had transcended physical form millions of years ago. They existed as living light, moving between stars as easily as thoughts. Their response came as patterns of colored light that translated simply, "We feel your pain across the cosmic web, but we gave up physical conflict when we became pure energy. We cannot fight beings we cannot touch. We offer our prayers for your peaceful transition to whatever comes next." The Aquatic Federation of Tidal responded from their vast ocean worlds. The depths teach us patience and wisdom. Violence creates only more violence. We suggest meditation and acceptance. Perhaps the Vraktar can be reasoned with if you offer them better alternatives. One by one, every advanced civilization in the galaxy responded the same way. The plant-based Verdant Consortium said violence went against their nature. The machine intelligence called the Collective spoke of violence being inefficient and wasteful. The peaceful trading empire of the Silk Route claimed they only dealt in commerce, not conflict. Days passed. The Vraktar horde moved closer to Kithaeron space. Their massive ships, ugly things covered in spikes and weapons, left nothing but empty space behind them. Scout reports showed them feeding their captured prisoners to their young. The Vraktar did not just kill their enemies. They made them part of their own strength. Thys broadcast again, this time with tears streaming down her fox-like face. "Please, someone must help us. We have children. We have art and music and stories that will be lost forever. Our libraries contain the wisdom of 1,000 generations. Do not let it all end like this." Still no help came from the advanced species. They sent messages of sympathy. Some offered to preserve Kithaeron cultural data in their archives, so future beings might remember them. But none offered ships or soldiers or weapons. The Kithaeron military prepared for their last stand. Their ships were built for exploration and trade, not war. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. They had no experience with the kind of total warfare the Vraktar brought. General Kess, the highest military officer in the Collective, looked at his forces and knew they would last perhaps hours against the approaching horde. Then, on the 7th day after the first broadcast, a new signal came. It was weak and came from a small star system at the edge of civilized space. The transmission was crude, using old radio technology instead of the quantum communications most species preferred. "Kithaeron Collective, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. We're coming." The message was so simple that at first the Kithaerons thought it was a mistake. Who were these humans? What was Earth? They quickly checked their databases. Earth was listed as a Class 12 death world in the Outer Rim. Class 12 was the highest danger rating for planetary environments. Most civilized species could not even land on such worlds without dying within minutes. The database entry for humans was short and disturbing. Carbon-based bipeds, evolved on high-gravity world with dangerous weather, predatory life forms, and toxic atmosphere combinations. Somehow developed space travel despite hostile environment. Approach with extreme caution if encountered. Do not visit their homeworld. Thais stared at the entry in confusion. These humans lived on a world so dangerous that other species considered it uninhabitable. How could such beings help against the Vraktar? She sent a reply immediately. Human Captain Chen, we are grateful for any assistance. But you should know what you face. The Vraktar horde has destroyed entire civilizations. They are experienced warriors who know only violence. Are you certain you wish to help us? The human response came quickly. Ma'am, we've read your files on the Vraktar. We've studied their tactics and their ships. We're still coming. ETA is 6 days. General Kess pulled up what little information they had about human technology. Their ships appeared to be simple metal constructs, nothing like the elegant bioships of the Verdant Consortium or the energy matrices of the Luminari. Human weapons seemed crude, using chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles instead of sophisticated energy beams or quantum disruptors. How can such primitive beings help us? Kess asked Thais. Their technology is centuries behind ours. But Thais was studying something else. She had found records of other species that had encountered humans in the past. The reports were strange and contradictory. The peaceful melon traders described humans as friendly and helpful, always willing to share food and stories. But the aggressive Scalix pirates had a very different story. They spoke of humans with fear, calling them the demons who smile while they kill. One report stood out. It was from a Torgan merchant who had been captured by raiders. The humans found me in a pirate slave camp. I expected them to negotiate for my release as civilized beings do. Instead, they attacked immediately. I watched them move through that camp like death itself. They saved me and 40 other prisoners. When I thanked them, their leader just shrugged and said it was the right thing to do. I think these humans are the only species in the galaxy that chooses to be violent instead of being forced into it. As Thais read more reports, a pattern emerged. Humans seem to exist in a strange middle ground between civilized and savage. They could be peaceful traders and explorers, but when faced with genuine evil, they became something else entirely, something that even veteran warriors feared. The Vraktar scouts were now only 3 days from Kitharan space. Their advanced ships had been spotted by long-range sensors, massive dark things that blocked out stars as they passed. Soon the main horde would arrive. Billions would die. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships were racing toward them. Ships built by a species that lived on a world where everything tried to kill them. Ships crewed by beings who had somehow survived long enough to reach the stars despite their hostile home. For the first time since the crisis began, Thais allowed herself a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the Deathworlders could do what the advanced civilizations could not. Maybe sometimes survival required monsters to fight monsters. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Kitharan space exactly when they said they would. Thais watched the sensor readings with growing disappointment. Only 12 ships. They were small compared to Vraktar warships, and they looked rough around the edges. Patches of different colored metal showed where repairs had been made. Scorch marks from old battles decorated their hulls like scars. This is all they sent? General Kess asked, staring at the display screen. 12 ships to fight a horde of thousands? The human fleet's lead ship sent a communication request. Thais accepted it, and the main screen flickered to show a human female in a dark blue uniform. She had short brown hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed too old for her face. Behind her, other humans moved around what looked like a command center built from metal and blinking lights. Council Leader Thais, I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Defiance. We're here to help. Thais tried to hide her disappointment. Captain Chen, we are grateful for your response, but perhaps you do not understand the scale of what we face. The Vraktar horde has over 3,000 ships. They have conquered dozens of star systems. Chen's expression did not change. We read your intelligence reports on the way here. We know what we're up against. Then why did you only bring 12 ships? General Kess interrupted, unable to contain his frustration. For the first time, Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. General, these 12 ships contain more firepower than your entire fleet. But ships don't win wars, people do. We brought 5,000 Marines and enough equipment to turn your worlds into fortresses. The humans requested permission to land and coordinate defense plans. Thais agreed, though she wondered what these strange beings could possibly do that her own military had not already considered. An hour later, Captain Chen and her staff arrived at the Kitharan capital in a shuttle, that looked like it had been built in someone's garage. It was all sharp angles and exposed machinery, completely unlike the smooth, organic shapes that civilized species preferred. When the shuttle landed, armed humans in heavy armor stepped out first, scanning the area with weapons ready. "They act like they expect an attack even here," observed Commander Vell, Theis's military aide. Chen herself wore no armor, just her uniform and a small weapon on her belt. She walked with the confident stride of someone who had seen many battlefields. When she met Thys in the council chambers, she got straight to business. "We need to see your defense plans and your military capabilities," Chen said. "Also, we'll need detailed maps of your cities and industrial centers." General Kess spread out holographic displays showing Kithaeron defenses. Their strategy was simple. Meet the Vraktar in space, try to destroy as many enemy ships as possible, then retreat to planetary shields and hope for the best. Chen studied the plans for a long moment. "This won't work," she said finally. "You're fighting like prey animals. All defense, no offense. The Vraktar will just overwhelm your positions one by one. What do you suggest?" Kess asked, clearly offended by her assessment. "We fight like humans," Chen replied. "We make them come to us, then we make them pay for every meter they advance." Over the next day, Chen's people began arriving on the planet's surface. They came in groups carrying equipment that the Kithaerons did not recognize. Heavy crates marked with symbols in human writing. Weapons that looked brutal and efficient. Machines that could dig tunnels or build walls in hours instead of days. The humans began studying everything about Kithaeron society and the approaching enemy. They interviewed refugees from Vraktar attacks, asking detailed questions about enemy tactics and behavior. They examined captured Vraktar weapons and ship fragments. They even requested access to Kithaeron entertainment media, claiming they needed to understand how the enemy thought. "They learn like predators," Thys observed to her aide, "always asking, 'How can we use this?' Or 'Where is the weakness?'" The human leader's approach to planning disturbed many Kithaerons. Chen treated the coming battle like a complex puzzle to be solved, rather than a tragedy to be endured. She spoke casually about acceptable loss ratios and strategic sacrifices. When a Kithaeron counselor asked about minimizing civilian casualties, Chen's response was chilling. "Counselor, the best way to protect civilians is to kill the enemy before they reach civilian areas. Everything else is just hoping for mercy from beings who don't understand the concept." As human equipment continued to arrive, Thys began to understand why other species feared these Deathworlders. Every human tool seemed designed for violence. Even their medical equipment looked like it was built to work in combat zones. Their food rations were designed to provide energy for fighting, not taste or comfort. The cultural differences became clear when Chen requested a meeting with Kithaeron civilian leaders. She wanted to discuss evacuation procedures and emergency protocols. During the meeting, she suggested that civilians should receive basic combat training. "Fighting training?" asked Counselor Marin, an elderly Kithaeron female. "But we are not warriors. We are teachers and artists and farmers." "Ma'am, when the Vraktar arrive, they won't care what your profession was," Chen replied. "They'll just see food. We can teach your people how to fight back, how to hide, how to survive." The suggestion horrified most of the council. The idea of their peaceful people learning to kill was almost unthinkable. But Thys noticed that some of the younger counselors looked thoughtful. They had seen the intelligence reports. They knew what happened to Vraktar prisoners. That evening, Thys invited Chen to dinner in her private quarters. She wanted to understand these humans better. Chen accepted, arriving with just one bodyguard who remained outside the door. "Captain, may I ask you something personal?" Thys began as they ate. "Your homeworld, Earth, it is listed as extremely dangerous. How did your species survive long enough to develop space travel?" Chen set down her eating utensil and considered the question. "Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes that wiped out most life forms. We survived because we learned to adapt, to fight, to never give up. But surely there must have been peaceful periods in your development." "Some," Chen admitted. "But even during peaceful times, we remembered the lessons of the dangerous ones. We kept our weapons sharp and our skills ready. Because on Earth, peace is just the time between threats." Thys found the concept disturbing. "Do you not have art? Music? Philosophy?" Chen smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine rather than predatory. "We have all of those things. Some of the most beautiful music in our culture comes from our darkest periods. Art that captures the struggle to find hope when everything seems hopeless. Philosophy that tries to understand why beings should be good to each other when the universe is so harsh. I think I understand, Tice said slowly. Your people create beauty despite the violence, not because of the absence of it. That's right, Chen agreed. We learned that civilization isn't something that just happens. It's something you have to fight for every single day. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Fractor scouts had been spotted only 2 days away from the main Kithaeron system. The advance force consisted of over 50 ships, larger than the entire Kithaeron fleet. General Kess called an emergency meeting. We could evacuate the outer worlds, he suggested. Fall back to the core systems and make our stand there. Chen shook her head. No retreat. We fight them here. Every world they take makes them stronger and us weaker. But how can we possibly stop them? Kess demanded. They outnumber us by hundreds to one. Chen's smile returned, cold and confident. General, you're thinking like a civilized being. The Vraktar are expecting a civilized response. They're not expecting Deathworlders. As if summoned by her words, a new signal appeared on the sensors. More human ships were arriving, larger ones this time. They carried supplies, weapons, and thousands more Marines. The ships took positions around Kithaeron worlds with the precision of a military force that had done this many times before. Thys watched the deployment and felt something she had not experienced in days. Hope. The humans moved like they had a plan. More importantly, they moved like they expected to win. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they intended to make the Vraktar regret their appetite for conquest. The transformation of Kithaeron space began immediately. Human engineering teams swarmed over the peaceful worlds like ants, but instead of building, they were preparing for destruction. They turned beautiful cities into fortress networks, connected by underground tunnels and hidden weapon positions. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez led one of the construction teams working in the capital city of Tima. He was a thick-built human with scars on his arms and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. When the Kithaeron city planner, an engineer named Felix, saw what the humans were doing to his city, he was horrified. You are destroying everything beautiful, Felix complained as he watched human machines tear up a peaceful park to install something called a kill zone. This plaza was designed for public gatherings and festivals. Rodriguez looked up from the tactical display he was studying. Yeah, and now it's designed to stop enemy infantry advances. Much more useful when you're trying to not get eaten. The humans had divided the city into defensive sectors. Each sector could fight independently if the others fell. They built weapon positions that were hidden inside normal buildings. They dug tunnels that allowed defenders to move unseen between different areas. They even planted explosives in bridges and important buildings, ready to destroy them rather than let the enemy use them. This is madness, Felix said. You are turning our home into a battlefield. No, Rodriguez replied patiently. The Vraktar are turning your home into a battlefield. We're just making sure it's a battlefield that favors the defenders. The humans worked with an efficiency that amazed and disturbed their Kithaeron hosts. They had obviously done this before many times. Every human seemed to know exactly what to do without being told. They moved through the construction process like it was a well-practiced dance. When Thys visited the construction sites, she was shocked by the changes. Her beautiful capital looked like it was preparing for siege warfare. Barricades blocked streets. Windows in tall buildings had been turned into sniper positions. The humans had even installed weapons in the tops of the graceful towers that Kithaerons used for meditation and art. Captain Chen, Thys said when she found the human leader studying building blueprints. What you are doing to our cities. It frightens my people. Chen looked up from her work.
I understand that, Council Leader.
But right now your choice is between frightened people in fortified cities or dead people in beautiful ruins. The human preparations went beyond just construction. They brought out equipment that seemed designed specifically for urban warfare. Portable barriers that could be set up quickly. Weapons that could fire around corners. Communication devices that worked even if the main networks were destroyed. Medical stations that could operate under enemy fire. What disturbed Kithaerons most was how casual the humans were about all of it. They talked about acceptable casualty rates and strategic withdrawal points like they were discussing the weather. When a Kithaeron asked Sergeant Rodriguez about the likelihood of survival, his answer was typically human, ma'am. If everyone does their job and we get a little lucky, most of us will probably make it through this. But I've been in fights where most of us wasn't good enough and we won anyway. That's what we're planning for. The humans also began intensive intelligence gathering about their enemy. They interviewed every refugee from Vraktar attacks, building detailed profiles of enemy behavior and tactics. Captain Chen personally spoke with a melon trader who had survived a Vraktar raid on his homeworld. They move in pack formations, the trader explained, his tentacles shaking with remembered fear, always in groups of 12 to 15. They communicate through scent chemicals and subsonic calls. When they attack, they try to spread terror first, then feast on the frightened. Chen made notes on everything. Do they have any taboos? Things they won't attack or places they won't go? Nothing, the trader replied. They see all other life forms as food sources. Even their own wounded are consumed if they cannot keep up with the horde. The human leader nodded like this information was useful rather than horrifying. What about their command structure? How do they make decisions during battle? As the humans gathered information, they began to understand their enemy better than any previous victims had. They studied Vraktar biology, learning that the aliens had enhanced senses of smell and hearing but poor long-range vision. They analyzed captured weapons, discovering that Vraktar technology favored close-range combat and intimidation over efficiency. They're pack hunters who evolved on a world with limited resources, Chen explained to her staff during a planning meeting. Everything about their culture is based on dominance through violence and consuming the weak. But that gives us advantages. How? Asked Lieutenant Kim Park, Chen's intelligence officer. Pack hunters are used to prey that runs away. They're not prepared for prey that fights back with planning and coordination. Their whole psychological profile is built around intimidating victims into submission. The humans began developing tactics specifically designed to exploit Vraktar psychology. They planned fake retreats that would draw enemy forces into prepared kill zones. They designed psychological warfare techniques that would confuse and disorient pack hunting instincts. They even created special ammunition that would make human weapons louder and more intimidating. Meanwhile, other human teams worked on something that horrified Kitharan observers even more than the military preparations. They were teaching civilian defense classes. Despite the initial resistance from the Council, many younger Kitharans had volunteered to learn basic survival skills. In hidden facilities around the city, humans taught peaceful aliens how to hide, how to fight, and how to kill if necessary. The classes were led by Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a small human female who moved like a predator despite her size. She was teaching a group of Kitharan civilians how to use improvised weapons when Theiss visited to observe. The key is not to think of this as violence, Santos was explaining to her nervous students. Think of it as problem-solving. The problem is that something dangerous wants to hurt you or your family. The solution is to make it stop wanting that. One of the students, a young Kitharan named Zell, raised his hand. But Sergeant Santos, we are not warriors. How can we possibly fight beings who have conquered entire star systems? Santos smiled. And like all human smiles in this context, it was not entirely reassuring. Kid, the Vraktar are used to fighting other warriors. Professional soldiers who follow rules and fight in predictable ways. They're not used to fighting desperate civilians who will do anything to protect their families. She picked up a simple tool from the workshop table. This is a welding torch. Normally you use it to join metal pieces together, but if something is trying to eat your children, it becomes a flamethrower. The Vraktar won't expect that. The training sessions continued around the clock. Humans taught Kitharans how to move quietly, how to set simple traps, how to treat injuries, and how to organize resistant cells. They also taught them something equally important: how to think like survivors instead of victims. The biggest weapon the Vraktar have is fear, Chen explained during a general briefing to both human and Kitharan forces. They use terror to paralyze their enemies before the fighting even starts. But fear is just another enemy to defeat. General Kess, who had been observing the human preparations with growing amazement, asked the question that many Kitharans were thinking. Captain Chen, your people seem very experienced with this type of warfare. How many times have you done this before? Chen's expression grew distant. General, humans have been fighting for survival since before we developed language. We've fought against nature, against each other, against alien threats, and against things that don't fit into any normal category. This is what we do. But surely your world must have achieved peace by now. We have periods of peace, Chen admitted. But we learned long ago that peace is not a permanent state. It's something you have to earn and defend every day. The moment you stop being ready to fight for it, someone will take it away from you. As the days passed and the Vraktar advance scouts drew closer, the changes in Kitharan space became more dramatic. Peaceful trading stations were converted into military bases. Civilian transports were retrofitted with weapons and armor. Even the gentle agricultural worlds began training their farmers in guerrilla warfare tactics. The humans worked 18-hour days, sleeping in shifts and eating while they continued planning. They seemed to have unlimited energy when it came to preparing for combat. Thais began to understand that this was not just professional duty for them. This was what they were born to do. On the final day before the Vraktar scouts were expected to arrive, Chen called a meeting of all senior commanders, both human and Kitharan. The conference room was filled with tactical displays showing the defensive positions throughout the system. "Tomorrow, we find out if all this preparation was worth it," Chen said. "The enemy advance force consists of 53 ships carrying approximately 12,000 Vraktar warriors. They expect to find helpless prey waiting for slaughter." She smiled that predatory human smile that had become familiar to the Kitharans. "Instead, they're going to find Deathworlders. And they're going to learn why the rest of the galaxy fears us almost as much as they fear the things that hunt us." The Vraktar advance fleet emerged from faster than light, travel at the edge of Kitharan space like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships were massive, dark things covered in spikes and weapon ports. Each vessel was designed to strike fear into any civilized being who saw it. The hulls were decorated with the bones of previous victims, and the ships themselves seemed to grow rather than being built, as if they were living things fed on violence. War leader Gazkul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Harvester, and surveyed the Kitharan system through eyes that had seen the destruction of dozens of civilizations. The herbivorous prey species had been broadcasting surrender offers for the past hour, begging for mercy and offering tribute. It was always the same with the weak races. They talked of peace and civilization until the moment death came for them. "How many ships do the prey have?" Gazkul asked his sensor operator, a smaller Vraktar whose job was to count victims before the feeding began. 47 vessels detected, war leader. All small, built for trade rather than war. They also have planetary defense platforms, but they appear to be designed to stop asteroids rather than military attacks. Gazkul's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. It would be another easy conquest. The Kitharans would break quickly, as all civilized species did when faced with true predators. Within days, his forces would be feasting on a population of billions while they waited for the main horde to arrive. "Begin the approach," he commanded. "Send the fear broadcasts on all frequencies. Let them know what they face." The Vraktar ships moved toward the inner system in their traditional attack formation. 12 pack groups, each consisting of 4 or 5 ships that could support each other in combat. They broadcast recordings of their previous conquests, showing Kitharan defenders what had happened to other species who had dared to resist. But something was wrong. The expected panic and chaos in the Kitharan fleet did not happen. Instead of scattering in terror, the prey ships moved into organized defensive positions. Even more disturbing, several new ships had appeared alongside the Kitharan vessels. These newcomers were smaller and looked primitive, but they moved with the confidence of experienced predators. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Chen watched the Vraktar approach with calm calculation. Her tactical display showed 53 enemy ships against her own force of 12 human vessels, plus the Kitharan fleet. The numbers looked bad on paper, but Chen had fought worse odds before. "Enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. Reported Lieutenant Park from her sensor station. "They're maintaining traditional pack formation, just like the intelligence reports predicted." Chen nodded. The Vraktar were following the same tactics they had used for thousands of years. Overwhelming force, psychological warfare, and close-range combat designed to maximize terror in their victims. It had worked against every civilized species they had encountered. But humans were not civilized in the way that other species understood the term. "Signal all ships," Chen ordered. "Execute Plan Alpha. Time to show these pack hunters what apex predators look like." The first phase of the battle began exactly as the Vraktar expected. The human and Kitharan ships opened fire at maximum range, sending energy beams and projectile weapons toward the advancing enemy fleet. The Vraktar absorbed the damage on their heavy armor and continued their advance, broadcasting victory howls that they expected would break enemy morale. What they did not expect was for the human ships to suddenly scatter like startled prey, breaking formation and fleeing toward the inner system. The Kitheran ships followed, abandoning their defensive positions in apparent panic. Gazakul's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The prey breaks as always. Pursue them. Do not let any escape to warn the other systems. The Vraktar fleet surged forward, pack instincts driving them to chase fleeing prey. This was the moment they lived for, when fear replaced rational thought in their victims and the hunt became a slaughter. They pushed their engines to maximum power, desperate to catch the retreating ships before they could reach the safety of planetary defenses. They flew directly into the trap. The fleeing human ships had led them into a carefully prepared kill zone. Hidden among the asteroids of the outer system were weapon platforms that the Vraktar sensors had missed.
Automated defense mines activated as the enemy fleet passed overhead.
Most devastating of all, the human ships that had seemed to panic suddenly turned and attacked from unexpected angles. Ambush! Screamed the sensor operator on Gazakul's ship as explosions bloomed around the Vraktar fleet. Hidden weapons everywhere. The prey was pretending to run. For the first time in his career, Gazakul experienced something that few Vraktar ever felt: confusion. Prey did not set ambushes. Prey did not pretend to flee only to turn and attack. Prey certainly did not coordinate complex battle plans designed to exploit the hunting instincts of their predators. The battle quickly became a nightmare for the Vraktar. Their pack formations designed for hunting scattered civilians made them perfect targets for coordinated military attacks. Human weapons, built for efficiency rather than intimidation, cut through Vraktar armor like it was paper. Worse, the humans fought with a cold intelligence that was completely alien to the emotion-driven Vraktar mindset. War leader called his communications officer. Pack leader Vashtar reports his ships are surrounded. Pack leader Kruldan says the enemy is using weapons that fire around corners. How is this possible? Before Gazakul could answer, his own ship shuddered under weapons fire from 3 different directions. The humans had somehow positioned their vessels to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Even more disturbing, they were targeting specific systems on Vraktar ships with surgical precision. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy vessels outright, they were disabling engines, weapons, and communications in calculated strikes. The space battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, half the Vraktar advance fleet was destroyed or disabled. The surviving ships retreated to the edge of the system, where Gazakul tried to understand what had gone wrong. The prey fought like... He paused, struggling to find words for something outside his experience. Like hunters. Like they knew what we would do before we did it. But the space battle was only the beginning. Several Vraktar ships had managed to land troops on the outer planets before being driven off. 12,000 Vraktar warriors now stalked through Kitheran cities, expecting to find helpless civilians waiting to be consumed. Instead, they found urban warfare. Squad leader Vexthon led his pack through the streets of a Kitheran city, following scent trails that should have led them to cowering prey. The streets were strangely empty, but that was normal. Civilized species usually hid in their homes, hoping that predators would not find them. What was not normal was the explosion that killed 3 of his warriors when they stepped on a hidden mine, in what had seemed like an empty plaza. Traps, Vexthon snarled. The prey sets traps like vermin. His pack moved more carefully, but the city itself seemed designed to kill them. Streets that appeared to lead toward civilian areas instead led to dead ends covered by hidden weapons. Buildings that looked empty suddenly erupted with gunfire from concealed positions. Even worse, the weapons being used against them were not the sophisticated energy beams that civilized species usually employed. They were crude, loud chemical projectiles that created more fear than damage. Except these particular chemical projectiles were designed by humans, and they created a great deal of damage indeed. Vexthon's pack made it 3 blocks into the city before they encountered their first human defender. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped out of a building that the Vraktar had already searched, moving with the calm confidence of a predator in his own territory. "Hey there, ugly," Rodriguez said, raising a weapon that looked like it had been built in a workshop rather than a factory. "Welcome to Earth Rules." The weapon fired a projectile that exploded on impact, filling the air with razor-sharp fragments. 2 Vraktar warriors fell immediately. The others charged, expecting the lone human to flee or freeze in terror like all prey did when faced with superior numbers. Rodriguez did not flee. Instead, he smiled and pulled out a second weapon. This one sprayed chemical fire that stuck to everything it touched and burned with temperatures hot enough to melt metal. The charging Vraktar found themselves running through a wall of flame toward an enemy who seemed genuinely happy to see them. By the time backup arrived, Vexthon was the only survivor of his pack. He had never experienced defeat before, and his mind struggled to process what had happened. The human had fought like a Vraktar, but with weapons and tactics that no civilized species should possess. "Report," demanded the pack leader who had come to investigate the sounds of battle. "The prey, they fight like hunters," Vexthon whispered. "They use fire and explosives and weapons that should not exist, and they smile while they kill us." Similar reports came from Vraktar forces throughout the occupied cities. The prey was not behaving like prey. They had turned their own homes into battlefields and seemed to know exactly how to exploit Vraktar pack tactics. Even worse, some of the defenders were not even soldiers. The news of the Vraktar defeat spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On Zephyria Prime, the crystal beings who had refused to help the Kitherans gathered in their resonance chambers to discuss the impossible reports. The Vraktar horde, which had consumed civilizations for over 2,000 years, had been stopped by a single human fleet and some hastily trained civilians. "This information cannot be accurate," hummed Elder Resonance Thymel, her crystalline form flickering with disbelief. "No species has ever successfully resisted a Vraktar advance force, but the evidence was undeniable. Recordings from the battle showed human ships executing tactical maneuvers that civilized military academies taught as impossible. More disturbing were the images from the ground fighting, where peaceful Kitheran civilians fought with weapons and tactics that violated every understanding of civilized warfare. On the energy plane where the Luminari dwelt, similar discussions took place among beings who had transcended physical form long ago. They had observed the battle through quantum sensors, watching in fascination as creatures of flesh and metal demonstrated a level of violence that their pure energy minds could barely comprehend. The humans fight as if death is a tool rather than an ending. Pulsed ancient light Vexera, they accept casualties that would break any reasonable species, yet continue fighting with increased determination. "Perhaps," had responded Elder Radiance Morton, "this is what survival requires in a physical universe." We had forgotten the lessons of matter and mortality. But nowhere was the reaction stronger than among the Vraktar themselves. The main horde, over 3,000 ships carrying millions of warriors, had received war leader Gazkul's retreat message with disbelief, then rage, then something approaching fear. Horde Master Drakmor, supreme leader of the Vraktar species, had ruled through strength and terror for over 4 centuries. No enemy had ever forced his forces to retreat. No prey had ever inflicted significant casualties on his advanced scouts. The very concept of defeat was so alien to Vraktar culture that they had no proper words for it. "Bring me the survivors," Drakmor commanded from his throne aboard the massive horde ship World Eater. "I will hear their stories directly." War leader Gazkul stood before his supreme leader, his once proud form showing wounds that would never fully heal. Around him, the handful of pack leaders who had survived the battle waited to give their reports. "Tell me how prey species defeated trained warriors," Drakmor demanded. Gazkul struggled to find words. "Horde Master, they were not prey. They fought like us, but with weapons and tactics we have never seen. They used our own hunting instincts against us." "Explain." "They made us chase them into prepared kill zones. They hid in buildings and attacked from directions we did not expect. They used fire and explosives and weapons that seemed designed specifically to kill Vraktar." Gazkul paused, remembering the human smile that had haunted his dreams since the retreat. "And they enjoyed it, Horde Master. They smiled while they killed us." Pack Leader Vexton stepped forward, his body trembling with remembered trauma. "The humans, they are predators, Horde Master, but not like us. We hunt for food and dominance. They hunt for something else. They hunt because their world taught them that everything wants to kill them, so they learned to kill everything first." The reports continued for hours. Every surviving warrior told the same story. The humans fought with a combination of intelligence and brutality that the pack-hunting Vraktar could not counter. Worse, they had taught their allies to fight the same way, turning peaceful herbivores into guerrilla fighters who used civilian areas as battlefields. When the reports were finished, Drakmor sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke the words that no Vraktar leader had ever spoken before. We will not attack the Kithrin systems again. The decision split the Horde. Some pack leaders argued for a massive assault that would overwhelm even human defenses through sheer numbers. Others, who had listened carefully to the survivor reports, understood that the humans had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. They had broken the Vraktar psychological advantage. If we attack them again and fail, argued war leader HFY, every species in the galaxy will know that the Vraktar can be defeated. Our empire will collapse as our former victims rise against us. Drakmor knew she was right. The Vraktar ruled through fear and reputation. If that reputation was shattered, their scattered enemies would unite against them. The recordings of human victories were already spreading through civilized space. Soon every peaceful species would know that resistance was possible. The Horde turned away from Kithrin space and moved toward easier targets on the galactic rim. But the damage was done. For the first time in their history, the Vraktar had been forced to retreat by their intended prey. In Kithrin space, the victory celebrations were mixed with horror at what their peaceful people had become. The cities that had been turned into fortresses remained armed and ready. The civilians who had learned to fight could not easily forget those lessons. The Kithrin collective had been saved, but it was no longer the same civilization that had sent out that first desperate plea for help. Council leader Thys met with Captain Chen in the ruins of what had been a beautiful art gallery, now converted into a military command center. Through the broken windows, they could see Kitharan work crews removing the defensive positions and trying to restore their city to its former peaceful state. Captain Chen, Thys said, "My people are grateful for what you have done. But I must ask, what have we become?" Chen looked out at the workers, many of whom still wore the weapons they had learned to use. "You've become survivors, Council Leader. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Will we ever be the same peaceful people we were before?" "No," Chen replied honestly, "but that might not be a bad thing. Peace is precious because it's fragile. Now your people understand what it costs to maintain." Over the following weeks, human engineering teams helped restore Kitharan infrastructure, while human military advisors trained Kitharan forces in modern warfare. The relationship between the two species grew closer as they worked together, but it was built on a new understanding of what civilization required. The transformation was not limited to the Kitharans. News of the human victory reached other peaceful species throughout the galaxy, many of whom had lived in fear of various threats they felt powerless to resist. Requests for human assistance began arriving daily, not just from species threatened by the Vraktar, but from civilizations facing pirates, slavers, and other predators. At first, the human government was hesitant to become involved in galactic conflicts. Earth had spent centuries focusing on its own survival and development. But as the requests multiplied, a new understanding emerged. "We have a choice," Captain Chen explained, during a video conference with Earth's leadership. "We can remain isolated on our death world, or we can use our unique capabilities to help species that cannot help themselves." The decision, when it came, surprised no one who understood human nature. Earth would answer the calls for help, not out of any desire for conquest or glory, but because it was the right thing to do. Within months, human fleets were operating throughout the galaxy, bringing deathworld tactics to bear against various threats that civilized species could not handle. They were never conquerors or rulers. They came, solved the problem that peaceful beings could not solve themselves, and moved on to the next crisis. But the galaxy was changing in other ways as well. The spectacle of humans teaching Kitharans to fight had inspired other species to reconsider their own pacifist philosophies. The Verdant Consortium began developing defensive strategies for their plant-based colonies. The Aquatic Federation started training their peaceful merchants in basic security procedures. Even the advanced civilizations that had refused to help during the crisis began to change. The Zephyrian Empire established military academies for the first time in their history, studying human tactics and trying to understand how violence could be used to preserve civilization rather than destroy it. 6 months after the battle, Thys received an unexpected visitor. Elder Resonance Thymel of the Zephyrian Empire materialized in the council chambers, her crystalline form flickering with what seemed like embarrassment. "Council Leader Thys," the Zephyrian said, "my people wish to express our regret for our failure to assist you during your crisis. We were wrong to believe that civilization could be preserved through inaction. Thais studied the elegant alien being before responding. Elder Thymol, my people have learned much about the price of peace. Perhaps your people and mine can learn from each other. We would be honored, Thymol replied. And we would like to request human advisors to help us develop defensive capabilities. We have realized that our philosophy of non-violence, while admirable, left us unable to protect the very values we cherish. Similar requests came from across the galaxy. Species that had spent millennia pursuing